In 2008, Elon Musk had enough money left to save one company, not both. Most people think SpaceX succeeded because Elon Musk was a genius billionaire who threw money at rockets until they worked. Sounds logical. A PayPal fortune. A man obsessed with Mars. Of course he won. But here's the problem. By August 2008, SpaceX had blown up 3 rockets in a row. The 4th would be the last. Elon was personally bankrupt. He was borrowing money from friends to pay rent. NASA wouldn't return his calls. The entire aerospace industry was laughing at him, calling him a Silicon Valley tourist who'd never put anything into orbit. And the real story isn't about the rocket. It's about one phone call he almost didn't take, and a decision that, if he'd made it differently, would have ended SpaceX forever. To understand how Elon ended up here, we have to go back to 2001. He's 30 years old. He just sold PayPal to eBay. His personal share comes out to around $180 million after taxes. For most people, that's the ending. The yacht, the early retirement, the Forbes profile. But Elon Musk has a different ending in mind. He sits down one weekend and types one question into NASA's website. When are we going to Mars? He clicks through every page. There is no answer, no mission, no timeline, nothing. NASA, the agency that put men on the moon when his father was a teenager, has quietly given up on the next planet. This breaks something in him. So he does what almost no one with $180 million would do. He flies to Russia, 3 separate trips. He sits in dim Moscow conference rooms across from former Soviet rocket designers, surrounded by vodka bottles, trying to buy a refurbished intercontinental ballistic missile so he can strap a greenhouse to it and land plants on Mars. The Russians laugh. One chief designer literally spits on his shoes. On the flight home, Elon opens a spreadsheet. He starts calculating the raw cost of rocket materials: aluminum, titanium, fuel, electronics. By the time the plane lands in Los Angeles, he has his answer. The materials cost about 2% of a finished rocket. The other 98% is markup. If he just built it himself, the math worked. Barely. What he didn't know yet, what no one knew, was that the next 6 years would empty his bank account, end his marriage, and bring him within 72 hours of losing everything he'd ever built. In 2002, Elon found SpaceX in a warehouse in El Segundo, California. No clean rooms, no prestige hires, just a man who'd never built a rocket trying to hire engineers who'd never been allowed to. The plan is simple, and almost everyone calls it insane. Build a small rocket called Falcon 1 that can reach orbit for under $10 million. The cheapest American rocket at the time costs around $65 million. Boeing and Lockheed have a stranglehold on every government contract. They've held it for decades. The industry's response is unanimous. He'll fail. He has no aerospace background. He's poaching engineers from real companies and asking them to do impossible things on impossible timelines. The first launch, March 2006. Falcon 1 lifts off from a tiny island in the Marshall Islands. It burns for 41 seconds, then crashes into a reef 250 feet from the launch pad. The cause? A single nut, corroded by salt air that came loose. March 2007. The second Falcon 1 launches. This time it gets all the way up, almost reaches orbit. Then the second stage starts wobbling. The engine shuts down early, and the rocket falls back to Earth in pieces. 2 attempts, 2 failures. Tens of millions of dollars gone. But the worst was still ahead. August 2008. Third launch. 3 customer payloads strapped to the nose, including ashes of astronauts who'd asked to be sent to space. Falcon 1 lifts off cleanly. The first stage burns perfectly. Stage separation begins. And then, because of a tiny timing error in a newly upgraded engine, the bottom stage drifts upward and slams into the top stage. Everything is destroyed. 3 rockets, 3 failures, 3 explosions broadcast to the world. That same year, the global financial crisis hits. Lehman Brothers collapses in September. Capital dries up overnight. Tesla, his other company, is also weeks from bankruptcy. His marriage to his first wife is ending. He is borrowing money from friends to pay his rent in Los Angeles. He has poured every dollar of his PayPal fortune into both companies, and he has nothing left. He later said, "I remember waking up the Sunday before Christmas in 2008 and thinking, I never cry, but I might cry today." Then he made a decision that, by every rational standard, should have destroyed him. He had enough money left for one company. He could give all of it to SpaceX, or all of it to Tesla. Either choice gave one company a real chance and condemned the other to certain death. Instead, Elon split his last $35 million between both. He later admitted it was probably the dumbest decision he could have made. The math said, kill one, save the other. The math was right. By splitting the money, he was almost guaranteeing both companies would die slowly instead of one dying quickly. But there was one thing he refused to do. He refused to choose which dream to bury. So he bet on a 4th Falcon 1 launch, using the last money SpaceX had. If it failed, the company would be over. There would be no 5th attempt, no more investors, no more credibility, nothing. September 28, 2008, Amalek Island. The 4th Falcon 1 sits on the pad. Inside the control room, Elon stands behind his engineers, hands shaking, watching the countdown. The engine ignites. The rocket clears the tower. The first stage burns clean. Stage separation works. The second stage ignites. 9 minutes after liftoff, Falcon 1 reaches orbit. SpaceX becomes the first privately funded company in history to put a liquid-fueled rocket into space. 500 employees in California erupt. Then, 3 months later, on December 23rd, 2008, 2 days before Christmas, Elon gets a phone call. NASA awards SpaceX a $1.6 billion contract to resupply the International Space Station. He breaks character on the call and screams, "I love you guys," into the receiver. The next day, Christmas Eve, 6 hours before Tesla would have missed payroll and collapsed, the Tesla financing round closes. Both companies survive by less than a week. What happened next still doesn't feel real. In 2010, SpaceX launches Falcon 9 for the first time and becomes the first private company to recover a spacecraft from orbit. In 2012, SpaceX docks with the International Space Station, something only governments had ever done. In 2015, they land an orbital rocket booster upright on a concrete pad in Florida. The industry that had laughed at Elon for 14 years suddenly couldn't keep up. In 2020, SpaceX puts 2 NASA astronauts into orbit on the Crew Dragon, the first time American astronauts had launched from American soil in nearly a decade. Then came Starlink, a constellation of internet satellites that started with 10,000 beta users in 2021. By early 2026, Starlink has surpassed 10 million customers across 160 countries. If you want me to do a deep dive on how Starlink actually became Elon's secret weapon, the business almost no one saw coming, comment Starlink below, and I'll make that the next video. Today, in 2026, SpaceX is preparing for the largest IPO in human history. The company that nearly died on a Pacific island in 2008 is now valued at around $2 trillion. It captured over 80% of all mass launched into orbit last year. It completed more rocket launches in 2025 than every other country and company on Earth combined. The man who is borrowing money to pay rent is now the most powerful private actor in space the world has ever seen. Remember that phone call from earlier? The one I said he almost didn't take? In late 2008, before the NASA contract came through, Elon's lawyers and advisors were pushing him to formally choose: liquidate SpaceX, save Tesla, or vice versa. They had paperwork drawn up. They wanted an answer by the end of the week. He never answered. He stalled. He delayed. He refused the call where he would have had to pick. And in that gap of refusal, that single week where he chose not to choose, Falcon 1 reached orbit and NASA picked up the phone. His decision wasn't brilliance, it was stubbornness. The refusal to accept that he had to kill one of his dreams to save the other. There's a strange truth tucked inside this story, and it's worth saying plainly. The version of Elon Musk we see on magazine covers today, the world's richest man, the rocket emperor, that man only exists because a different man, in December of 2008, sat in a half-empty office, broke, divorced, mocked, and made one absurd, irrational choice: to not give up on either thing. The lesson isn't that you should always bet everything. Most people who bet everything lose everything. The lesson is quieter than that. It's that the moments that define a life almost never look like victories at the time. They look like the worst week you've ever had. They look like a fourth try after 3 public failures. They look like a phone call you don't answer, because answering means surrender. And the next time someone tells you your dream is too big, remember that the people who built the future weren't the ones with the most resources. They were the ones who refused to put the dream down when every reasonable voice was telling them to. If this story moved you, there are more rises from zero where this came from. Stay with us. The man who couldn't afford rent now owns the sky.